Liberty in America is under assault. We no longer live in a reality that includes property rights. We're no longer the kings of our own castle. We no longer enjoy the true benefits of capitalism. Instead, we're negotiating our rights with our own government. This isn't how our country was founded. These aren't the ideas of our founders. It's time to seize back our country. This is the Liberty Hour, where these important issues will be discussed for the sake of America's future. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Constitution in the other, here's your host, Sean Thompson.
This is the Liberty Hour podcast, and we are live today, baby. Give us a call, 312-642-5600. So I have been tagged by a lot of the pseudo-intellectual fraud clown car conservatives as a never-Trumper because I criticize Trumponomics, but they obviously, I don't take much stock in what morons say, so good. Could always tell who you are by the people who don't like you, not the people who like you. Anyway, I have always identified Trump as the best option we have, as I will always take the collectivist populist over the collectivist socialists. But I will always recognize that populism and collectivism is not Americanism, as we come to find out in a lot of these policies. However, you know, this is a terrible day when he's going to be impeached. I think it is. It's terrible because what it shows you is that this mission of the socialist politician doesn't like to be slowed down, doesn't like to be detoured, and it has a lot of clout with it as you look at these fraud Congress people. And I don't just mean Mike Quigley and Underwood and Sean Casten from Illinois, although they are truly the pictures of fraud when you look it up. I mean, in lockstep, for the most part, I think there's two Democrats that have said, I really don't like the evidence and I'm really not going to go with it. But other than that, it's just lockstep politics. And I think that is a terrible sign for America when you lost the ability to discuss and to reason and to focus. But I haven't, and I'm not going to give it up. And as you see the sales pitch, you realize something. I realized something yesterday as I was listening to frauds talk about just really sales pitches versus principles and reality. They're just not discussing reality. And it reminded me of being young and trying to achieve wealth. And in the sector I went into was the commodities and stocks and trading sector, and now real estate. And the similarities in the bad people in those industries, you can't help but notice. And that there's a couple of things that happen when people go into the money business. There's this section of it, and it's a large section. And their representatives and their advisors and their managers. But they're never really attached to the losses other than bonuses on pay or commissions. They never really have their skin in the game. But the problem is they get, some cases, more respect because they have different various licensing and different various positions that as you're in any industry, you realize it's kind of an old boys club. It's a small group of a very connected few that kind of have an allegiance more to the fraternity they were from or to the connections that they had through bosses than they are in getting the right people in the right space. And you realize this is in every industry, but what's diabolical about it in the financial industry is that it breeds a certain collective corrupt corporatism that has a wall around it that really can't be broken in because it doesn't let new blood come in. It doesn't pay attention to the principles and the fundamentals of the economy themselves, especially when you're the way our country is, where we're 100 years down the road of really a corporatist acceptance by the body politic, by the people, to where they understand when big banks cheat and lie and steal and profit and ultimately fail, well, you really just have to bail them out. There's no recourse. Nobody went to jail for the derivative business. Nobody went to jail for the bad mortgages, for the phony loans, for the inside trading deals. In fact, they got rich. And those people who were perpetrators, they became more rich. And in my old industry of commodities, there were the office people who were advisors to sometimes actual traders or to groups or funds. And they really kind of gave their cookie cutter bullshit advice where they were repeating it mainly from other people in that corrupt industry. And they were not focusing on exactly what was happening in fundamentals and principles. But back then, it was an opportunity for the local traders, what they were called. They traded their own money. I spent bulk of my career, 99% of it, trading my money. I didn't trade other people's money, but I did have the licenses. I did obtain I was a registered investment advisor. I had a couple series licenses. And at the end of my career, I went into the retail business for about a very short time. I have to tell you, let me be very frank. I think I pulled off 8 months, and I left in a huff because I'm not a good company man. And the reason I'm not a good company man is because it was at that moment that the curtain was pulled back from these money managers and advisors that they're selling you shit. They're lying to the people. And as I went into the real estate business, I noticed the same kind of thing. And you could always tell these characters. They're always the more arrogant and confident than they are result-driven people. So they've got the makeup on, and they're manicured, and they've got the $3,000 suits on, and they have these little cliques that they hang around with. But when push comes to shove and they have to actually explain things, they talk in parables and latitudes and leave sentences hanging so that the person listening to it, in most cases, is afraid to ask backup questions. Because what the con artists and the liars and the frauds understood is most people don't want to look stupid. They're afraid of how, ironically, the con artist will judge them or the other people in the circle. So they never follow up with the most damning question ever asked of any con man. Why? Or how? Or what makes that happen? They don't like those very simple questions. So the idea of what they do is they condescend and they lie and propagandize. So they make very blanket statements. And they make very blanket statements, and they only cherry pick the results or the issues that support their scam. Okay? So this being said, we see it mainly on the Democrat side when they cherry pick this impeachment stuff, right? And they're only cherry picking very little excerpts of what they want to prove their point. Now, I need Donald Trump to stop the socialists because he is the last stop between this corporatism, this collectivism, this Keynesian soiree of fraud that he and the clown car conservatives are selling you now, which is far better, although damning, far better than the outright Democrat communist telling you he's a Democrat socialist. So I'm going to pick my poisons, and I love the idea that Donald Trump can stop the green energy fraud and the massive, massive legislative tyranny of nonsensical regulation. So there's no question, Trump is better. So as I go through this litany, I'm going to be inundated by morons on Facebook and on Twitter who are going to just throw accusations of clown car. Get in the clown car, and what are you, a never Trumper? And rather than focus on the fact, gee, if we're going to sit quietly by as this fraud goes on, and we're going to keep repeating this bullshit economy, then what are you going to do in 5 years? Because 5 years there will be somebody else. What are you going to do in a year if something unforeseen should happen, which I don't think will happen, by the way. I do not think that Democrats are running anybody of any charisma or anybody that anybody would vote for over Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump has enough intangibles that he will win handily again. But I happen to reject talking point propagandists. I find them to be the most pervasive of all propagandists because they carry with them a reputation or a glamour of telling you honestly and the right thing. And I want to ask those questions, those simple ones that they don't want to be asked, because I think it's important that they give you an explanation to it, okay? So here's an article that came out yesterday. And the article is from Zero Hedge, which is a site that I enjoy very much. I like all kinds of sites. I don't turn my eye because I may not agree with some of the people in the site. So I will pull articles from The Hill. I will look at the Drudge Report. I understand now the Drudge Report is not the friend of the conservative. After building up a conservative reputation, apparently it was sold, and Dan Bongino is going to start one. I don't know. Which is, he's basically promising you for propaganda rather than information. So these are questions I want to ask all of the pseudo-intellectual bullshit artists who come on airwaves of both television and radio and talk about how great the market is as we set new highs. And I just want to ask, why? Why, and certain specific questions. So Trump urges yesterday the Fed to cut rates again. This is yesterday. He wants to launch a quantitative easing to counter a strong dollar. So in essence, what he's trying to do is manipulate our currency to devalue it so that we can keep playing we're not strong, but we're the strongest of the shit. And I keep wondering, why are we playing down to the levels of countries that we accuse of manipulation and we accuse of government infusion and government subsidies? How could this be happening and the market be touted as something good economically? If the market is at its strongest point, and this is the litany of lists. See, they do a very, really simple brainwashing technique. They repeat to you these talking points and with a certain cadence in their voice so that you can remember it. And that's, quite honestly, in my limited patience for bullshit, I still will turn them off. I give about 7 minutes to bullshit shows. But I can still hear their voices in my head, right? Market's never been higher. Unemployment's never been lower. Job participation has never been higher. Wages have increased. Corporations have confidence. Corporation revenue has never been better. Tax revenue has never been better. And why would you have to urge the Fed to cut the rates and launch another quantitative easing to combat a strong dollar? Isn't that the goal? Isn't the goal to have such a strong dollar that you're getting the most value for your dollar in comparison to all the other currencies? So why would you need to do this if the first part of what you were telling me is true? B, why would I want to devalue my dollar if the point is to have a strong currency based on the strong financials? So most people don't want to ask the frauds on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox News. They don't want to ask them why. You're just to put mustard on this bullshit and eat it. And you're supposed to go around and say, this is all because of the president, which I always had a problem with, how presidents somehow seize, and this goes for the bad too, both the good and the bad of our economy. We, the actual public. So these are questions that the salesman from Western Avenue cannot answer you because they're just repeating and regurgitating nonsense rather than thinking through these points, rather than focusing on the fact the Dow Jones has 50% or the stock market has 50% less companies than it had in 2008. 50%. That venture capital, for the most part, doesn't have a mission of taking good companies and turning them public with an IPO and making money. What they're doing now is taking public companies and bringing them back into the private. So why? How could all of these things be happening? And the stock market, which is made up of companies that people forget what a stock is. I used to have fun doing this with people, be at parties, and I would always ask, what's a stock? And they would look at me like, what are you talking about? What's a stock? It's a company. It's a share in the company. It's a company. Yeah, but what is it? What makes it have a value that can funge or translate into an exchange of our dollar? What is a stock? And the answer is it's a currency of each company. It's their currency. Now, there are many factors that price that currency, but the price you see in a stock is sometimes the reflection of the weak dollar and the strong currency of said company that has a very finite amount of stock, a very limited currency. And it's based on their decisions, on their placement in the market, on their future, and on their liabilities, on their assets and liabilities, on their acquisitions. That's what prices that stock. So sometimes a high stock isn't necessarily an indication of a good economy. In fact, it can mirror a bad economy. So it would make sense then that we've increased the monetary supply of the U.S. dollar since 2002 over 500%. Now, those dollars don't come to us. Those dollars go to very select industries and targets and banks. And there leads another problem I have. So you've infused the monetary supply 500%, which just think about that. 500% in 16, 17 years, 18 years. But yet on the market at night, when banks are making loans, they don't have the cash to fund the deal, so they have to go to the window of the Fed in the repo market every night for the last 5 months and get triple the money they were getting in 2008 before the collapse. So how can all these things exist? If everything is what you're telling me it is, this is the greatest populist economy we've ever had, why do you have to keep pumping money in? And why are we forcing the Fed to keep those rates low so that these corporations could borrow the money at next to nothing? And why would you not incentivize the citizens and the funds that save their money and wanted a return in bonds and wanted a return in savings and in safe money? Why? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And as you see the control of our economy, from the smallest widget to the biggest steel beam, be controlled and orchestrated and seized by Washington, how could that be good for companies if it wasn't preventing the competition to those companies and allowing those companies to operate under false profits and price fixing? See, because that's what populism is. That's why the old people, the old conservatives, before the clown car conservatives, they rejected it because it was about a manipulated country economy. In the same fashion that now we hear Venezuelans used as pawns of charity, it's the exact same philosophy that turned that country into a third world that we are implementing, only this time it's good for us. And to me, the citizens are to fight the politicians when the politicians make bad moves, when the politicians have bad ideas. To me, an article that was printed up in The Hill yesterday of will the federal government's nonstop spending bid continue is that now it is an accepted philosophy that we are simply going to continue to increase debt ceilings. We don't even have a freaking debt ceiling. I wish we'd stop it. That we are just going to continue to spend. And the reason is, as I was listening to all of these people, I remember when John Stossel would be on Fox News. I remember when we were raging against the spending of a Democrat Congress and a Democrat presidency. And I remember when every newscast, even the ones now that they don't hate, would pull up the national debt. So I did it. And I just wanted to go over a couple of these numbers with you. And I know it's not the usual show. Look, I know I should be doing the how could they do this, or Rudy Giuliani's new idea of, so what if he did it? You know, that's their whole new defense. Just so what? Rudy Giuliani, you could find it on Drudge Report. And we're supposed to be tribal, and I'm supposed to think they're bad and we're good, and Trump's my man, and get on the train, and all the bullshit. Their economy is great, as I heard all day yesterday from con artists, from frauds. And I'm looking at this damn debt, and it's Without a murmur, it's in red. The whole damn board is in red. $23.1 trillion per taxpayer. The debt is $187,000 per us. That's the ones of us that pay tax, which, by the way, is about 20% of the country. Per citizen, it's at $70,000. That the federal spending, the official federal spending for this year is $4.5 trillion. And as you listen to Republicans, they're mad that they haven't agreed on a $2 trillion spending binge. So as I listen to the shows correctly chastise Democrats for $19 trillion in a Green Deal, for $40 trillion in a green or in a universal health care, for the idea that they're going to spend for free college after we advocate for free grade school and high school, do you realize there is but a sliver of a difference? And that as conservatives today on talk shows, conservative fracking talk shows, nobody talks about a $4.5 trillion spending by our federal government. It's insane. And that at the same time, the revenue is almost unimaginable by the federal government. They have never seized more. That the deficit, the difference between our spending and that record revenue is over $1 trillion. It's actually $1.2 trillion in 1 year. Why not just drinks are on the house, this son of a bitch, and throw it all on everybody's tab? Because this isn't real. These numbers aren't real. You've created a system that never has to pay the debt, ever. It never has to live up to its obligations. You have built a Ponzi scheme, the likes of which would make Bernie Madoff and the rest of the scam artists blush. And you have the audacity to come out here and tell me that the economy is good and this is a good frickin' job? You're doing a good frickin' job as you implement tyranny over choice and limit our ability to pay this back. See, because that's what collectivism is. It crushes the free thinker. It crushes the entrepreneur. It narrows the actual productive and the actual options. It corrupts a virtually uncorruptible system that is exposed to the trials of the consumer. It's why health care has failed. Do you understand what this Republican administration has done to our economy is the exact same formula that Barack Obama did to our health care? Just shrink it down, eliminate the competitors, fix the price, and everything will be okay. It's the same exact concept. And by the way, the trade deficit and all of it, it's going in the opposite direction. It's going in the opposite direction than what they anticipated, and they won't talk about it. So therefore, it's kind of like Obamacare. The similarities are undeniable. You told me that if you put this bill in place, if you took control, that most of us can't even remember what it was like prior to government control of healthcare. But what you said to me was, if you did it, it would be better. You actually called it affordable. If you did what you wanted to do, everything would be better. From the consumption, to the delivery of service, to the cost of product. Yet all three of those things have gotten drastically worse. It's the same thing in the economy. The average tariffs per family of four are over $2,200. But that's okay, right? Because it's patriotic. Now, here's the thing. For the people that can afford it, it's a nuisance. What about the people that can't afford it as we enter this Christmas season? I couldn't help. I sat in the morning show, and they had a girl here who was promoting different charities. And I kept thinking to myself, what are we doing that the countries that we're sending charity to have implemented and failed the exact policies that the American Republican is advocating? I can watch Congress and be disgusted when the Quigleys, when the Underwoods, when the Castins come on. I'm just disgusted at their stupidity and their arrogance and security in those decisions. Where's the hope when the Republicans do the same thing? I don't want Donald Trump to be impeached. I don't want him to lose. I want him to do the right thing in the name of capitalism, in the name of Americanism. And moreover, I would like it if more ex-capitalists, now Trump supporters, if more ex-patriotic American principled fundamentalists, now Trump supporters, would go back to those principles, because I honestly believe that this president can and will listen. That the idea we sit here waiting for decisions to be made, and when they're made half-assed as the phase one deal, and they really don't do what we need it to do, or in most cases do the exact opposite of what we need it to do, like prop up ethanol, which as Republicans, as conservatives, we should be fighting tirelessly to come on and eliminate those subsidies. I'm driving in, I listen to Steve Moore on the morning show. He wants to tout the fact that Donald Trump has eliminated, and great, thank you, by the way, for making it so people who drive Teslas don't get tax credits and subsidies of $10,000 a year. Thank you. That's it's about freaking time. How that even got through, I don't know. But you're doing the same goddamn thing for the entire ethanol market, only instead of thousands, you're doing hundreds of billions. And your idea is to celebrate that, is to force foreigners to buy that shit? Come on, man. So this is my point. This is why when I come on, look, it is so easy. You guys, first of all, if you've ever done a radio show or a podcast, it's a lot different than you think it is, okay? And there's a lot of ways to do it, and it's a con job. I was talking to my guy Justin in there with the leotards on, who, by the way, thinks he wore an ugly sweater. I don't see much difference between that one he's got on today and the one he had on yesterday. But anyway, I reject bits. I don't like bits. Comedy, staged bits, written down thing. And today, we're going to have my old neighbor from Wichita call in, and he's a crazy liberal. Blah, 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 blah. To me, that's bullshit, and you're a freaking con man. And it's not funny. It's a setup. To me, conversations and conservative talk radio and political talk radio needs to have the reaction, the guttural reaction of principles and fundamentals, rather than the staged out written philosophies of con men. That's what I think it's supposed to be. So when I come in, I don't write anything down. I grab a few articles, and we discuss those articles, and we discuss those principles. Because anything else to me is selling you bullshit. It's why when I used to go to meetings at old real estate companies who were more like Scientology classes, they would tell you, focus on the confidence. You have to build their confidence. You have to. And I used to say, well, how the frick can you live with yourself, man? You're selling a product you, in the very least, don't believe in and are unsure of the future, or you're advocating for all-out bullshit. So that's why I say to myself, gee, I cut people a break a little bit, not much, when they watch society accept the cancellation of their integrity and word through advocating for short sales in real estate or walking away from debt and bankruptcy. So for a minute I say, well, these people, to a certain extent, they're following the crowd, and they should know better. But they were led into the crowd by con artists. And that the American system isn't really about correcting it, isn't really about reestablishing principles and fundamentals. The American system is about making you feel good about being a scumbag, as far as I could see. And that's when you know it's nice to be over 50. It's when you know it, what do you got to put up with this shit for? 30 more years? I mean, how bad could it get? Right? If we're not worried about the debt at $23 trillion, are we really going to be that worried about it when it hits $105 trillion? Is it really going to be anything more than a talking point for a few principled Americans? And then you realize, only 20% of the people, maybe 30, have skin in the game, are actually paying it. As you demonize capitalism, as you demonize freedom. This is the thing that I reject most of populism. It's force. It's the same force as the Democrat, only it promises better management. But I am so uncomfortable at how comfortable the Trump-supporting Republicans are with forcing their fellow man into things. And you realize it goes almost to those bits, those preconceived comedy bits on radio, where you have taken the word fascist and cloaked it with the word liberal. I was a kid. I was watching Milton Friedman correct somebody about liberal. And I, like everybody else, had just listened to the word being used improperly. And I thought that socialists were liberal. And I realized as I educated myself that if you believe in those words of freedom, if you believe in liberty, you cannot be anything else other than an actual liberal. Not today's liberal, but an actual liberal, where you give the respect to somebody you disagree with, where you give the respect to somebody because they're an individual, where you're not trying to coerce or force their participation in anything, or force their choices, where you have enough respect for that person to understand. And then it kind of makes sense why liberal is derivative of or an extension of liberty. And my problem is I'm listening to fascism. I'm listening to government central control of everybody's life be sold as conservative and as an alternative to socialism, when all it is a better management of it. And now we're going to get all the hate in the mail. And you know what? I'm going to continue to do this on each and every issue, because you know who's right on the issues? Freedom is right. Freedom is always right. You may not like it, but it's right. And I'm going to point out when modern day clown car conservatives cherry pick freedom. I'm going to point out the fact when they rally for a baker's right not to make a cake for homosexuals. And then those same people rage against an internet company's right to govern their algorithms the way they choose. I'm going to show that conflicting stupidity. I'm going to show how those people who were so adamant that they were good, they were conservative, and they were Christian, don't implement any of those things that they think they are as they advocate for fascism and government tyranny over companies because they don't like them. We would be so much better off if we would pay homage to the principles of Americanism rather than try to bastardize mobocracy because we got enough people in the clown car. And that's the mission of what I think talk radio is. I think you can have a very good time pointing out these failures and frauds and the idea that these loathsome, unattractive, diaper-wearing politicians have the hubris to think that they're better than any of us, including my kid in there in leotards. He knows what's best for him. At least he thinks he does, and that's for me to make fun of. He looks ridiculous in yoga pants, but he loves them, and I love his freedom to wear them. The modern-day conservative is yesteryear's fascist. And yesteryear's fascist is simply more of it. There's simply more control. And all we have to choose from is fascism. You want Mussolini or you want Hitler? I don't know. They both seem pretty shitty to me. But in the end, we always have at least the idea that was America to fall back on. The idea. And sooner or later, it will prevail. Sadly, it's like Hayek's book. Not only are we on the road to serfdom, we're almost there, man. We are almost there. I think we're entering town limits here. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. And I'm hoping I don't have to wear one of those Star Trek jumpsuits. Although I could pull it off, kid, working out yesterday. Now, before I go, I got to tell you what happened to me yesterday. You know how you know you're getting old? You're in the health club, you're lifting, right? You jam into the music. You think everything's good. For a minute, I thought it was like 87, okay? Just for a minute. Some young punk walks in the weight room and says, hey, can we turn off the classic rock station? I'm thinking, holy shit. I'm jamming. I'm throwing the iron around the classic rock. And then the same little punk comes up to me and says, hey, Mr. Thompson. Turns out he went to school with my daughter. He's like, it's nice to see, you're still working out. I said, this little son of a bitch. I said, you know why I work out? You little punk. You know why I work out? He's like, no, why? I said, I'm the same weight that I was as a junior in high school. He said, really? I said, absolutely. I said, I think I'm a size bigger pants, same weight. But back in 87, 88, 86, 85, I said, buddy, look at me. This was what chicks dug. I said, they loved this guy in the 80s. In fact, I can't even count how many cheerleaders I was able to woo in the Chrysler Cordoba. That's right, I drove a triple gold Chrysler Cordoba. Let me tell you something, kid, 1977. Ricardo Montalban Cool was that car. All right? And he goes, oh, really? I go, yeah, in fact, didn't your ma go to Walther? And he looked at me. I said, yeah, think about it, kid. Then I went. So, see, I get the last laugh. The old man gets the last laugh in the end. But damn it. When you're working out the classic rock, you're an old son of a bitch. Listen, I've had a great time. I will be back Sunday night with Macbeth, who likes to talk. Lots to talk. We'll do Sunday night 8 to 9. And then next week, I think I'm doing the morning show and I'm filling in for Steve for a little while, although I'm never going to do that. When I do the show, it's Slap and Tickle. It's my show. I don't fill in for anybody, although I'm filling in the morning show. All right, so I've had a great time. Thank you for listening. I have to go to work. I hope it wasn't a little too academic, but this is important shit. Principles and fundamentals. I want to get all torn up. I look at these Democrats. I'm as offended as you are, but I'm also offended by the bullshit artists. That's what you need to be. A little more offended, a little more uncomfortable with tyranny, and a little more respectful of your own liberty that unfortunately we were given, we didn't have to fight for. And I want to make sure our grandkids don't have to fight for it either. So thank you very much for listening. Be back Sunday night.